Hey everyone, it's Finley. Welcome to the first episode of the Tekkers podcast, where we speak to leading founders in the sporting crypto world about how they're using crypto to benefit communities. And our first guest is a massive guest. We've got Berisha, who he's got his own sporting crypto Substack, and he's very much a pioneer in the sporting crypto world. He's been in the space for about 5 years now, and he's doing some pretty cool things. And if you want to stay up to date with everything to do with NFTFC, you can follow us on Twitter, NFTFC21, or you can jump into our Discord. We just released our official 2022 NFTFC jersey, which is free for our NFT holders, or if you're not, you can actually buy it for 60 USD. You can check out our website, nftfc.club. We'll be running future Twitter spaces. We'll be aiming for one at least every week, and we'll also be running a few with Remedy, where we'll just be talking about football and breaking down what happened on the weekend. So if you're interested in that, make sure you keep an eye out on the NFTFC Twitter. And without further ado, here's episode 1. Okay, and we are live. Welcome back to the Tekkers podcast. We are joined by Berisha. Pet, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
For those of you who don't know who Pet is, Pet runs his own Substack called Sporting Crypto, where he delves into all of the projects in the sporting world. He's the head of crypto media at Copper90. He's the co-founder of So Rare Hub, the founder of So Rare Guide, the co-founder of State of Play. Pet, how do you find time to do all that?
Well, a lot of those things have overlapped and haven't overlapped, but that's not actually all I'm doing, absurdly so. I've got my link tree pinned on Twitter where people can kind of follow what else I'm doing. Working on a sports NFT project called Sploot, which is going to be like a loot inspired sports NFT project, which is quite cool. It's very experimental. We don't really know where it's going to go. And it's completely community owned, so it's not something where we're just creating a project running off with the money. None of the team involved needs more money than they already have, so it's something quite fun that we're trying to do. Also helping on a couple other projects, one called Soulcast, which is an NFT platform that allows people to kind of customize NFTs to make them a bit more personalized. And I'm also a big fan and kind of helping out on a few bits and bobs on something called the Floor NFT app, which is basically just an app that aggregates all your NFTs into one kind of display. It's really cool. They've got an awesome community, and I've known the founder for a few years now. So also kind of like helping on a few other projects, and then some content consultancy and production, and then I also do kind of speaking engagements with you know anyone from kind of Universal Music to Adidas. So yeah,
that's really cool. So you're a busy man then.
I am, yeah, but it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I can understand that. I would love to know how your Web3 journey started, and what you were kind of doing before crypto, and what led you into this space.
Yeah, so I've kind of been involved in the space ever since I left university. So there wasn't really a before, to be honest with you. I did a bachelor's of engineering in product design, and so kind of went to uni thinking I would do a degree that was kind of quite broad and you know would allow me to go into finance if I wanted to, or become an engineer if I wanted to, or do whatever else, right? Because there was kind of a lot of maths and stuff involved. And I got to second year, didn't really enjoy it at all, and I realized this definitely wasn't what I wanted to do. And I kind of had a lot of soul searching to do, I suppose, because it wasn't something I was good at, and it wasn't like naturally that I was good at, and it wasn't something that I enjoyed. So it was kind of a double whammy in that perspective. And I kind of left uni. I remember going on a family holiday, one of those like boring ones where you basically do nothing. My younger brother, who is a big computer geek, had bought a bit of Bitcoin. He's 4 years younger than me, so at the time he was 17, I was 21, and I was kind of like, "What is it? Like, how does it work?" And kind of like as soon as he started explaining it to me, it made it just kind of clicked,
Yeah.
and I kind of understood why I thought it might have some value. Um, and then after kind of looking into that, looking at the time in kind of mid 2017, other things such as Ethereum that were getting a lot of traction on kind of like how many things were being deployed, how many developers were using it, and what was being built on it. And again, was completely captivated by that. I was like, wow, like this seems like a decentralized thing where anything could be built on it. And that blank canvas type of thinking really does excite me. And so
Yeah.
looked into that over the summer, got really interested, like went down the rabbit hole, had a load of time on my hands that summer, and and I got an internship at a company called 11FS, who are like a challenger consultancy type of thing.
Yeah.
One of their co-founders is also the co-founder of Monzo and Starling over here in the UK. He's also, I think, he's also an advisor to a bank in Australia called Ninja. So he's kind of very well known in the kind of fintech and and banking space. So 11FS are and were at the time like a consultancy for all things financial services, but they also had like a media arm. So they had a few podcasts. One was called FinTech Insider, which was kind of the flagship show. Then they had another one called Blockchain Insider and another one called InsurTech Insider. And I kind of went in there, did a load of different things as you do at like a 20-person startup at the time. And I kind of just found myself within the media team, and yeah, started helping produce the Blockchain Insider podcast. The producer there at the time was kind of like, "Oh, you seem to be really interested in this stuff. You seem to kind of know what you're doing. Like, why don't you, instead of you giving me stories that you think are interesting, why don't you start writing it and I'll kind of proof check it?" And so we kind of switched roles. Instead of me kind of assisting on that show, I kind of started leading it, and she was just like making sure I wasn't crazy as the experienced producer in the room. And then they just kind of let me run with it. So from kind of episode 20 to about 140 or something, that was my baby. And it's a podcast that I worked on for a long time. Hosted a few of the shows, wrote all of them, did all the research, found all the guests. We did live shows in Amsterdam. We did a live episode 100 show with Peter McCormack in London, and it went pretty well. And yeah, like so that wasn't the only thing I did there. I did a load of other stuff. I started up our live stream production, like a lot of the YouTube videos that are still on their channel. A lot of the most viewed ones were produced by myself, and started something called the FinTech Football League in mid 2019, which was like a league for fintechs to play football in, like actual football,
Yeah.
not virtual NFT football. And that got sponsored by MasterCard, which was pretty cool. And then I ended my time there as kind of like leading a US content expansion, and then COVID hit. I was part of like a huge redundancy process. Like about a third of the company got made redundant, and another third of the company basically left or was also made redundant after that, or shortly after that, as a whole part of the business got closed down. So, I was really fortunate in the sense that like I was thinking about my next steps anyway, if that makes sense. When COVID hit,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people my age were probably like, okay, do I want to be here forever? Like, do I want to do this or do something else? And um, I was kind of like, okay, let's see what happened. I didn't even tell anyone I was made redundant and or always going to be made redundant or was on furlough at the time. And I already had loads of inbounds just from the grapevine being like, oh, like I haven't seen your email pop up a little bit. Like, are you still there? Blah, blah, blah. Do you want to come and do this work? Do you want to come do this work? And I was kind of like, okay, maybe I'm okay here, whatever happens. And I basically had clients whilst I was on furlough, which was
Yeah.
pretty cool. So I already
Yeah.
had the grounding to go and leave and basically start consulting, making content for other people, which is awesome. When I announced that I'd left 11FS, like I had about hundreds of people inbound, which was amazing. Looking back on it, people wanting to hire me, people wanting to work with me, and out of that, I kind of developed a core set of clients in kind of fintech, sports, and crypto. And from kind of like July 2020 to July 2021, or even if we fast forward to now, so like 18 months later, that just continued to skew more and more and more and more and more crypto. And
Yeah.
so for a year, I was kind of doing like bits and bobs, like consultancy, like focusing on my own content, like doing content production for other people. And then kind of like early to mid 2021, like the crypto market obviously started heating up massively.
Yeah.
I started getting like a ton more inbound. I started connecting with people that I'd met through my blockchain insider days back in the day. Connected with someone called Jamie Burke, who's the CEO of Outlier Ventures, who are like a big crypto VC here. They also like run like a incubator, and he was like, okay, I've done 60 interviews with like the most prominent NFT influencers in the world, and I want to make it into a documentary. Could you do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. So ended up making an audio documentary called The History and Future of NFTs,
Yeah.
which was really amazing. Like I'd already obviously been down the rabbit hole. Like I knew about NFTs since kind of like 2018 with CryptoKitties. Like we actually bought the host of Blockchain Insider a CryptoKitty for Christmas. I think Secret Santa, which is quite funny. Back when they were really cheap. Couldn't buy one now, I think, for that price. I think it'd cost you that amount in gas alone.
Yeah.
But essentially, long story short, like my education was primarily through osmosis and production. So producing Blockchain Insider, being a substitute host on it every now and then, like just having so many really experienced and know everything people around me. I just learned so much from them. Then even like producing the NFT documentary recently, like I learned so much from just
Yeah.
producing that, where I thought my knowledge was like, okay, like in the kind of, 90th percentile compared to like the average person, to wow, there's actually loads of things I don't know. And that's what I guess has been the most amazing thing about this space is learning things almost every day, learning by doing, learning by reading, learning by writing, learning by listening. And I just yeah, I think it's really exciting. And I suppose as my client base shifted more and more towards crypto, I just kind of thought, I think this is what I want to do for the long haul. Like I think the excitement, the verve, the energy that I get when I speak to people in Web3 or people that are thinking about this space, is kind of unrivaled to anything that I've done before. And so I kind of just thought, yeah, this is probably what I want to be doing for good, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I definitely second that in terms of there's just so much going on in the space, and one second you think you know it all, and then you just read another article and it just completely blows your mind. So I completely agree on that. Um, just for the viewers listening, if they've not heard about NFTs before or they've been passive observers, I know it's a very vague question, but how would you describe NFTs to the normal sports fan who's just been on the outside looking in?
Oh god. Okay, so an NFT stands for non-fungible token, and the kind of clue is in the name, in the sense that like each token is non-fungible. And so you can kind of have two, I won't go into the technicals, but like you can have two sets of like technical NFT standards, whereby you have like a one of one out of like a set of 1,000, right? Like let's say we made pet NFTs and it was like a picture of my face and each of them was a bit different. They would each be a non-fungible token. They'd be unique to each other. But you could also have a picture of pet and make them one of 1,000, and each of those tokens are non-fungible. They are kind of semi-fungible in that the one of 100 and two of 100 are the same, but they are unique as each of them are specific tokens. So why this is interesting and important is because I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here, but like we've basically always like collected things, always wanted to own things, shiny or not, for like 30,000, 300,000 years. We've always made art. You know, if you go back to cave paintings found 360,000 years ago, up until the Van Goghs and the Banksies of our present. And so like humans have always wanted to create culture, basically, is kind of the first step in this journey. The internet kind of came along in the 90s, and we then started moving into a digital age. So we kind of had like a, you know, an industrial age, a tertiary age, where like services and banking and stuff became like a lot more of like a service and a way for countries to operate in from an economics perspective. The internet came around, and we basically started moving into a digital age. And throughout that time, we've basically had like, I guess, one or two kind of mini revolutions within that revolution. So we had kind of like peer-to-peer mail, right, which is what started it. We then had like searching the internet and getting information. And then we had, I guess I call it like social media, but also like content is where those two things, like if you imagine like the birth of Facebook, but also the comeuppance of YouTube coming in kind of at the same time, we basically ended up in this situation where like attention from that day just started skewing more and more digital. So the context is, we've always wanted to create culture. We've always wanted to collect things, own things as humans. A digital age started in the 90s. And now the weird thing is we can't own anything on the internet. And NFTs have become a vehicle to do that via blockchain technology. And a lot of people will say, like, why would we not just use like a server? And like, it's not really possible to do so. It's like you can't have a centralized authority that verifies everything, right? This can only happen in a world without humans, and like there are loads of conditions for this. Like if say if we had one big database that was able to do what a blockchain does, that database would have to be perfectly secure. The code, like input and output, would have to be perfectly secure. Like we'd all have to trust intrinsically the database owner. And as humans, we've kind of seen with what governments around the world are doing, and with what big tech companies have been doing from kind of leaks in the future, that we can't really trust anyone. If everyone everywhere agrees that this kind of like protocol or database can upgrade at the same time, if everyone can agree that like that it can be permissionless, so you can't have like APIs that shut on and off. So let's say if Facebook were this big database that proved all NFTs were non-fungible, but no one else could verify that data, we'd all have to basically trust it. And if those APIs were there, hypothetically, they'd have to be never blockable, in the sense that like Facebook were offering to give you this data, they could never shut it down. And then the last bit is like every single country around the world would have to unify a lot of their laws to ensure that like this database was the sole truth. And blockchains aren't perfect, but they do everything that I described in a better way than any centralized entity, right? Ethereum as a blockchain cannot be replicated through a centralized authority, because we'd all have to trust that centralized authority. We'd all have to agree when it upgrades and how quickly it does. We'd all have to tap in through APIs and make everything open source, and it would have to become trustless. And now with humans involved, that's basically impossible, isn't it? Because I can't create a big application on a private blockchain that is owned by a centralized authority and trust that that private blockchain would never shut off that faucet. And that's where the power of decentralization comes in. Now, a lot of people are kind of like, might be listening, being like, oh, wow, he's gone down this crazy rabbit hole of like, why centralized versus decentralized? But it's important, because a lot of people think that one of the reasons NFTs are stupid is because, well, it's just a picture. Like, why can't this just be, you know, why does this have to involve crypto? From the like explanation I just gave, this is why it does, because it has to be built on a decentralized application, and all of those right now are blockchain based. All of those now have their own token to fuel that economy or that microeconomy. So take a step back. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, they're a way of owning things on the internet that can prove via that decentralized blockchain that you are the owner. You can prove where it's come from. You can prove when it was made, how it was made. And you can also see it on a variety of applications. You can even have the art on chain. So there's an NFT recently that I bought called Cyber Brokers, where the SVGs, the actual art files, are on chain. So if I wanted to, I could go see the art on chain or download those files off that chain and do with those SVGs what I want. So I think a lot of people have misunderstood why there is value here, and to some extent the medium is in the message and in the vehicle of decentralization to some extent, in the sense that it's not really just about the picture, it's what the picture represents or what it is.
Yeah.
And the last point I'll make, because I've talked about pictures a lot, because that is the caught fire in the NFT community on the world, really.
Yeah.
Bored apes, and everyone's talking about these silly monkey pictures. NFT is just a token, so it can be anything. So, for example, the History and Future of NFTs documentary that I produced, we made it so that the first 1,000 people could only listen if they had an NFT. And now, to claim that NFT, you had to tweet about the documentary. Once you verified that you had tweeted it through something called Link Drop, through a very talented dev that we knew, that service was automatically able to verify that through Twitter's API.
Yeah.
And you were able to then mint on Polygon, which is a layer 2, so it's a lot cheaper than Ethereum. It's just another blockchain, basically, or a layer 2 blockchain on Ethereum. And you're able to mint that for a very small amount by connecting the wallet that had that NFT into the into the site where you could listen to the podcast, or the audio documentary rather. You were able to be one of the first 1,000 listeners, which was pretty cool. So an NFT can be a token. It can be a key to allow people to enter a gateway into pretty much anything that you want. It can be a way to create private communities. It can be a way to do pretty much anything you want. And I think that's what we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years. Like the first 3 or 4 years of NFTs has become very primitive compared to like what people are thinking about now. And we're going to go from very quickly from JPEGs to games to pretty much everything and anything in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think you hit the nail on the head. The first one being ownership, and just the way technology is going, and humans becoming more digital creatures. I mean, we spend most of our days online anyway, so actually being able to show that you own digital assets, and not only digital assets, I think there's a big market for attaching the digital assets to physical assets as well. And I think there's a big market for that. But not only ownership as well, I think where it gets really interesting is the access that these NFTs give you. And I think it just stems from the nature of the media that you see nowadays. Most of it's just talking about all of these monkey pictures going for hundreds of thousands. But what people fail to realize is it's not just a picture, and it's not just the fact that you get to say that you own the picture. It's what benefits that it gives you. And you were talking about like token gated interviews and stuff like that. But I think the world's really limitless in terms of what these projects can give back to their communities. And where I think it gets interesting in the sporting world is all of these communities are so devoted to their sporting teams. And historically, all you've been given back is really like bragging rights, the ability to wear their jersey and stuff like that. But what really interests me is what if these clubs or communities actually looked at how devoted their fans were and started to actually give back to their fans. And it kind of leads me into my next question of where do you see NFTs fitting into the sporting world, and how do you see projects benefiting the communities?
So to be honest with you, I don't really think there's an amazing product market fit with sports at the moment. Like, I think there has been examples of things being done really, really well. So, for example, MetaKey and the Australian Open did an amazing. I mean, as you know, over in Australia, did an amazing
Yeah.
project together called the Australian Open Metaverse, and that was a resounding success. They did NFTs of tennis balls. And you were able to actually have input on the art. Like, if you sent fan art in and it was good enough, the Australian Open and MetaKey team were able to actually use that art on a tennis ball. And the best thing about it is the metadata on the NFT was updated dependent on like match winning shots in each game of the Australian Open, which I thought was really, really cool. Something that hadn't really been done before. And it sold out in seconds. Like, and say what you want, you might think these things are dumb, but like, the market says otherwise. Like, people want these things. Like, there is demand for these things, and you might think they're dumb. You might think it's a bubble. People talk about it being a pyramid scheme, which is bizarre. But I really think like the market is mostly and always correct, and we've seen crypto go from from when I entered the kind of the space from I don't know how many hundreds of billions to over 2 trillion market cap now. It's the market knows, right? And I really think that there is going to be a lot more interesting things in the sports world. Like, I think Sorare have done a great job, for example, although even their product is kind of contingent on real world IP. They don't really have
Yeah.
any of their own IP, but they've managed to leverage kind of league and team IP that they've got in a really, really amazing way, and created like a pretty cool game that over 100,000 people play and really enjoy. Socios have been commercially very successful for themselves and for clubs, but I think their product offering is pretty broken and simple, and also it just doesn't kind of match up for me with the ethos of like where I see this space going. Like, what I think about like fans in football, it kind of feels like a big cash grab from clubs and the company itself,
Yeah.
and it's not what I think of when I think about fan tokens. So I think there's really good examples of how it's worked well. I think there's some examples of how it's not working well, and I think where it's going to fail. But I think overall, what you see with kind of in the NBA, for example, with Top Shots, which was a resounding success. But further on from that, like FTX sponsoring Golden State Warriors on the 75th anniversary of the NBA, everyone who was at the FTX sponsored Golden State Warriors arena got a free NFT commemorating
Yeah.
the 75th anniversary. Similarly, FTX have done the same thing with Miami Heat, which is they play in the FTX Arena, which is sponsored by FTX. They've given free NFTs to everyone there. And on their side, they're like, well, if 100 of these people open accounts and buy NFTs on our platform or buy crypto on our platform, then it's going to be worth our while. It's probably worth our while even if not, because of the brand's kind of recognition, the legitimacy, and the marketing effects that it will have. But still, like, it's genius, and it's a superpower that like a lot of sponsors can't. Like, if you're an oil and energy producer, what are you going to do? Like, airdrop everyone like a can of oil, can of fuel? I mean, like, in the
Well, to
current
be
climate,
fair,
it'd be pretty
yeah,
useful, right? But
right
like,
now would be pretty
it,
valuable.
it's just not practical. And that superpower of being able to do things digital first and digital only gives you so much leverage over all the brands that are completely contingent on physical items. And I think we're going to see more and more really cool projects come out. Like, I know, like, I'm speaking to a lot of people that are doing some really, really cool things. And over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to be really, really awesome things come out. But right now, I think we're in a space where there is just as much good as bad. Um, there are a lot of small time like scams. There are a lot of people that aren't understanding IP, that are infringing on IP, especially like kind of sports athlete IP. And I think it's maybe going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm
Yeah.
I'm still very resolutely positive on the longer term future.
Yeah, I completely agree. Another question I had is, do you see any potential for DAOs in the sporting community? I know when I think of like DAOs in the sporting world, I think back to when all the clubs came together and proposed the idea of a European Super League. And in a way, it was almost like a forced governance where everybody kind of forgot about the teams that they were supporting, came together and protested against the European Super League. And because of the fans' voice, it was a big reason as to why that European Super League didn't happen. So, do you see any potential for DAOs in the sporting world? And if so, what would that kind of look like in terms of clubs and DAOs?
Um, not in the short term is my kind of short term answer. I think DAOs are really, really far away from acting and replacing corporate governance structures.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of difficulties when it comes to sports clubs. So, for example, I, as an Arsenal fan, if a DAO bought Arsenal and wanted me to vote on who the coaches and who the players that are starting are, like that's just not something I'm interested in. All I care about is, like, I'd love to own a piece of Arsenal, right? Don't get me wrong, but what I care about just as much as the ownership or the people leading the organization care about the club and are good at making decisions.
yeah,
I don't want to make the decisions myself. I just want to make. I would love to have a input on who makes those decisions, though. Is what I'm saying.
yeah,
And now I think there's going to be like a digital version of a co-op that kind of like a halfway house between what we see in like cooperatives and DAOs right now. Make
yeah,
some sort of play and run at sports clubs in the future. But every single DAO I've seen right now who wants to buy a sports club or be involved in buying a sports club either doesn't understand crypto or doesn't understand the sports world well enough, or sometimes both. And almost 99.99% of the time, they are looking to make money from it,
yeah,
which is fine. Like I personally don't mind people getting cuts of things if they truly make a situation better for fans and if fan ownership was given. But it's very difficult, especially as like sports franchises and leagues are getting more and more commercialized, not less. And so, how do you take over a $3 billion organization through like group ownership? It's very difficult, and um, I just can't really see it happening short term. I think DAOs are really primitive at the moment. They're basically like a Discord server, snapshot, some NFTs or governance tokens, um, and a few people like trying to get stuff done. Realistically, like there is so much that needs to be built by DAOs and for DAOs to kind of like make these processes all a lot more frictionless. But at the end of
yeah,
the day, like people are still at the end of these things, and people always cause friction. So no matter how frictionless the technology becomes, people will always create friction. It's not kind of the same as like, for example, if me and you launched an NFT and it was in loads of people's wallets, we couldn't then stop another project being like, okay, if you have X NFT, we're going to airdrop you a token, right? We couldn't stop that.
yeah,
So there's no friction between Pet and Finley creating an NFT to another, competitor coming in and giving another token to everyone who owns that NFT, or saying, hey, here's a free t-shirt if you own this NFT, blah, blah. There's no friction between us on this side of the blockchain and them on that side of the blockchain, if that makes sense. With DAOs, you basically have to reach consensus to do things. And
yeah,
like that can be quite paralyzing. Um, there
yeah,
is not as much autonomy as like the DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, is the aim. It's not the current reality. So when people are
yeah,
starting DAOs, they're kind of the D bit without the A and O at the moment. They're kind of decentralized, or they are,
yeah,
because the equity is spread through tokens or NFTs in a decentralized manner. They're not autonomous, and they're certainly not organizations or organized for that matter. By the way, this is me generalizing. This is like 99.9% of DAOs. There are a few exceptionally good ones that do very well. Like if you'd go look at Flamingo DAO and how they've got a treasury of like over $1 billion worth of NFTs now. There's a lot of YGG, like the gaming guild, who are a DAO as well. Like loads of really really interesting projects that work really well, but the majority of them don't work well. And the DAOs that do, they're better at like ownership rather than organization. And I just think we're very far away from that. So listen, this is someone who's really bullish on the space, and I'd say net, I think bullish on DAOs because they're really like I've seen the magic of them. But they're
Yeah.
certainly very far away from one, buying any sports clubs or franchises, two, running them, three, giving all the ownership to fans, and then four, even if you do manage to do that third point, managing to create an infrastructure that organizes all those fans and keeps them engaged and keeps them coming back to vote on things that they feel are really important, such as should we spend this money on, like, I don't know, if you own decentrally own a eighth tier football club and you're like, oh, should we spend £1,000 of our budget on getting new lighting? And there's a vote there. Does that pass the threshold of being important or not? Or would fans just want um like the organizing body or the the instigators, the people that have been voted to be kind of leaders of this council to be that are delegates to be making those decisions. I think you also have other issues on kind of like non-disclosure type stuff. Like, for example, if there was like a big NBA trade going on and one of the delegates, or like let's say three of the delegates in the managing team of eight at this NBA team or franchise were part of the DAO or representative of the DAO, does that make it easier for leaks to happen? I suppose the counter
Yeah.
argument to that would be like, okay, well, the GM has a family and he's got friends and he's got cousins. Like, what about the leaks there? But then if they can't tell the DAO, is that as transparent as the kind of ethos of having everything on a blockchain? Like, yeah, there are a lot of there are a lot of things that need to be hashed out. I think there are a lot of very interesting technologies coming to the fore. Um, ZK Snarks, like a lot of other like ways to verify data without actually knowing what the data is, stuff like that, which is quite cool, I think. And I think we'll see a lot of that plug seamlessly into a lot of blockchain applications in the future. But right now, where we are, I think we're very far away from DAOs owning sports groups. I think the ideology behind it is kind of sound, and I think for the most part the ones that are going out there and doing it, the thinking is pure, but a lot of them are just thinking about the money and thinking, well, if
Yeah.
we raise 800 million to buy this sports franchise, we're going to keep 10% of it, and that's $80 million
Yeah.
for pretty much doing nothing, which is not the right way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. And I think from my perspective, just as a personal investor and someone who runs his own project, I think the projects that really excite me and the best conversations I have is where people are actually forming projects to benefit communities first and thinking about the money that can be made second. And I think it's very obvious sometimes, obviously not all the time, but it can be quite obvious when a project is just trying to make their money. It kind of leads me into my last question. What would you say to the people that think NFTs are a scam? I know all the conversations I have with family and friends that don't know NFTs, they kind of turn their heads straight away. All the media that's surrounding NFT, most of it's about rug pulls and everything like that. So, what would you say to those people, and just how to go about learning about the space before making their judgment?
So I don't think it's a purely educational thing. Just on one point, I do think that the technology just has to get better, more intuitive, more user friendly, more secure for there to be more than 30 million MetaMask wallets out there. So what I'll say on the kind of like the first bit, the ownership, is it's going to feel weird. We're going to feel in 25 years time, we're going to feel that this was like the stone age of the internet, whereby people couldn't own digital items. And people in their 40s, 50s, 60s may think, oh, that just sounds weird and it's a scam, blah, blah. But like I'm telling you now, every 16-year-old, every 14-year-old, every 18-year-old, every 20-year-old, they are going to be crypto native. They're going to be they're going to be born into decentralization to some extent. Like they are going to know what these things are before they have the capital to spend in this world. And put that into perspective. And I also said, like, the market, like, whether you think they're a scam or not, the market is kind of telling us otherwise. So there's a article that constantly gets wheeled out by the FT, which is like, oh, NFTs are dead, and they wheel it out every like few weeks when there's like a lull in the market. But actually, if you go look at like the amount of NFTs that have been owned by people, um, I think it's gone from about 1.4 million to 2.3 million in 2022, according
Yeah.
to NFT Go is the data site. And I don't know how accurate they are. I don't know where they're pulling the data from, but I've seen them kind of, uh, I, I've seen them noted as a fairly reliable data source before. More and more developers are working on blockchains around the world week on week. Like, I'm telling you, the amount of people that have asked me if I know any devs for hire um, in the past like month is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, people are like
Yeah.
so keen to build. Like, just go and look at how much VC money was plowed into blockchain based things in
Yeah.
2021.
Crazy.
I think it was like $16 billion, something like that, compared to like maybe like under a billion in 2020. So look,
Yeah.
like, the market is telling you one thing, but your granddad is telling you another. Like, with all due respect to granddad, like, I I think I know who's going to be on the right side of history. Now, on
Yeah.
the scam point, this is really true, and it's because of the janky nature of user interfaces from a crypto perspective. It's more likely than your normal application than that you could get scammed. But what I will say, I've been scammed on PayPal, and I've never been scammed through crypto.
Yeah.
Even when I was like a beginner, right? Like, when I first opened a MetaMask wallet, when I first opened my first Coinbase account, my first Binance account, I've never been scammed from what I know. Touch wood. I have been
Yeah.
scammed via PayPal and eBay. I've been scammed via Monzo, like my
Yeah.
challenger bank. So there are scams everywhere, and there are bad actors everywhere. However, bad actors are more uh, they congregate more on like the bleeding edge. And so when e-commerce first came about, ton of fraud. When internet banking first came out, ton of fraud. Like, we're seeing banks every other month get you know fined massively for money laundering, right? HSBC, um, Credit Suisse recently, etc., etc. So there's one thing I'll say is there's fraud everywhere. Like, in 2008, my dad would not input his credit card into an internet-based site because he was scared of being defrauded. And to
Yeah.
some extent, he was not on the money, but like, he wasn't like far off. Like, there were a lot of people and a lot of scam artists out there stealing
Yeah.
details, um, and being scammed via the internet and via e-commerce, being sold fake stuff, or getting their credit card details stolen. So yes, there are scams. Yes, there are rug pulls, and yes, the the kind of issue of like anonymous actors and people being able to just run away with money is really, really bad. But I do think they will be flushed out as the technology gets better and more usable and more secure.
Yeah.
Um, and I had one other point, which was, oh, like, a lot of people think, oh, these NFTs are going to go to zero, blah blah blah. Like, like, this NFT will go to zero. This one, a lot of NFTs have already gone to zero. Like,
Yeah.
99% of them have already gone to zero, and 99% of future ones will also go to zero. But that is because liquidity is NFT's best friend and worst friend. And I'll explain what I mean. When you and I buy a pack of Panini stickers, or a pack of baseball cards, we never look at them and think, "Oh, this is worth $1, this is worth $5, and this is worth $10." Right?
Yeah.
We literally just open them and we're like, "Oh, it's cool. It's a Michael Jordan card, or it's a Shaquille O'Neal card, or whatever." But there's not really an instant secondary market where we can list those things and sell them, because they're
Yeah.
physical items. I need to go on eBay, check how much like they're roughly going for, if they're selling at all, list it, and if there's a buyer, there's a buyer. If not, there's not. Right? So physical items have less liquidity than digital items, is my first point. Second of all, lack of liquidity in a market or for goods, like physical goods, like cards. Why do we never say that they're like zero? Right? We never say, "Wow, this Michael Jordan like card is actually worth nothing, but I just paid $10 for the pack." That's a bit weird, right? Um, but for some reason, people think that like it's a detriment to NFTs to say, wow, this one has lost 90% of value. It's like, well, people are paying stuff for physical goods and not valuing them off the bat because there's no secondary market to liquidate them on. The only reason why people are
Yeah.
valuing things on a secondary market for NFTs is because there is a secondary market to liquidate them on. And so the Premier League have been reportedly agreed a deal with Consensus to do NFTs, and now there'll be a lot of detractors there saying like, "Oh, it's going to be on the Premier League when some of these go to zero." Realistically, though, like the Premier League have been selling shirts, they've been selling
Yeah.
merchandise, they've been selling Panini sticker IP for ages. All of those
Yeah.
things have gone to zero already, mate. Like
Yeah.
it's just, they're just feeding into the demand of a global
Yeah.
audience that wants to own digital things. They want to own NFTs with Premier League IP on. And so you can poo-poo that. You can say that like, oh, they're going to go to zero or it's a scam, blah, blah. But I think with all those points that I've made, you kind of start to paint the picture that this thing isn't going to go away. I can tell
Yeah.
you for certain it's not going to go away. Like we don't know when the bubble will burst and when it will change from JPEGs to something else. But non-fungible tokens as a technology form is here to stay, whether people like it or not. Now you can call out the scams and the intrinsic value of all these JPEGs that maybe don't have much intrinsic value to you, but the market will decide that, and 99% of them will go to zero. But a lot of them will still be valuable. So don't be shocked by that. Don't be shocked when Bored Apes are still worth a lot of money in the future. Don't be shocked when CryptoPunks are worth a lot of money in the future. Don't be shocked when something new comes along and it's worth a lot of money. Like the market is deciding these prices. Your kind of frankly crude opinions aren't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you made really good points. There's always scams, whatever you're buying, there's always going to be scams. Outside of Web3, there's already scams. And I think just for me and for the viewers listening, I would say that if you're investing in projects that you believe in, that resonate with you personally, and their long-term vision is something that you believe in, then I think that's how you can almost not avoid scams, but I think make your chances a lot better if there's a team that's fully doxed, and talking about a vision and a mission that you believe in. I think that's where you can kind of just prevent the idea of like looking at the floor price and the need to check OpenSea every day to see the price. Like what you said, like Panini stickers, like they're worth zero, but people hold them because they're cool. And they're part of your identity. So I think NFTs are very much the same. I am very conscious of your time, Pet. For all the viewers listening, if you do want to learn more about NFTs in sport, I would strongly suggest going to read Pet's Substack, Sport and Crypto. It's a very good read. This podcast was meant to be a short one, but Pet, I could listen to you talk all day about this stuff. You're very knowledgeable, and I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you. I mean, I just want to finish in saying that no one's really that knowledgeable in this space. Like, no one is an expert in NFTs, Web3, or crypto. Well, maybe crypto because it's been around a lot more, but like, it's, everyone is super green to this. Like, even I've been in and around this space for like 4 years, 5 years now, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert at all. Even though many people might, I just feel like we are still on the very beginnings of this journey, whatever it may be. And I think the VC statistics that I mentioned, 16 billion versus under a billion in a year. I think 2022 might surpass that 16 billion valuation as well. We're just at the beginning because like capital is flooding from institutions now to help build actually functioning really cool stuff. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, you're very modest. Where can the audience find you? I can always link the socials in all the descriptions.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Twitter at Pet Berisha, so PetBerisha. You can find me on LinkedIn, Petrit Berisha, so Petrit, and then my second name. And yeah, you can follow my newsletter, sportingcrypto.substack, and that goes out every Monday. Just going over all the week's kind of crypto and sports news.
Yep, cool. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Cheers, Pet. I appreciate your time.
No worries.